her, you know? Well, did she knowingly? What did that have to do? Well, did she
Nothing.
park in the wrong spot? That had nothing to do with it.
Nothing.
It's about treating each other
With respect.
in regard, yeah, with respect, and regardless of what we look like. Or, I have a daughter who's queer, and she must not have been watching me for the last 5 years, decided to run for council. So she's actually running for council right
Good
now.
for
And,
her.
as a parent, you just sort of say, oh gosh, because as a parent, we always want to protect, right? What's she going to be subjected to? And she looked at me last week. She said, Dad, I'm pretty tough. And I said, well, you're going to have to be tough, because the world can be harsh, and we can make it a better place when we all stand up, when we do what's right, as we were talking about earlier. Right. So anyway, I promise I'll stop talking now, and you can kick up whenever you're ready.
We're going to start recording in about 5 minutes officially. Thank you so much for tuning into another great episode of We Can Fight Like Cats If We Have to. You have involved in the ring today, Mr. Alon McCall. You have Natasha Akhtar. You have myself, Sally Davis. But most important of all, we have a really good treat for you today. We have Mayor Darling from St. John. Now, for those of you who do not know this individual, I mean, many of us don't know him personally, but if you don't know of him, he is pretty darn cool in my book. He's pretty, well, let's be honest, he's pretty direct, he's pretty straightforward, and he's pretty fearless. And I feel, and I think we all feel, really, the three of us feel, that we really found an ally for the first time in the New Brunswick leadership, anywhere in the New Brunswick leadership, within Mayor Darling. Oh my goodness, I can't even speak today. Within Mayor Darling's leadership, we found an ally, and it was really a great gift and a great treat. Thank you so much for your time today, Mayor Darling.
My pleasure. Thanks. And I know Mayor Arnold very well. So that's a pleasure to be mentioned in her company as well. Thanks very much for inviting me. Look forward to having a great chat. And I take it as a compliment when someone says I'm direct, because being direct and being courageous is about living values, and it's about aspiring and dreaming, and it's about moving our regions and our province forward to be more inclusive, where our words match our actions. So I look forward to our chat today.
Thank you so much for taking the time. I mean, we've been discussing amongst ourselves how cool you are, and we had a million questions as to why you're so cool. But something that I think a lot of people of color would like to know, and it's not common knowledge, and I'd like to ask you this question first and foremost, is we've mentioned this earlier in a conversation, you and I, but you are clearly a visible white male. There's no, masking that. Why is it that racism is such a passionate cause for you? What triggered this reaction? It's very uncommon for someone of your social status and your privileged position to be so passionate and willing to risk it all to speak a truth. And so we'd like to know, what is your personal motivator?
Wow, that's a great and deep question. I think, first of all, a piece of it I have to just say is my childhood, and some of the challenges, trauma, if I could use that word, that I was exposed to as a kid. I had a mom and dad who loved me. My dad was a brilliant university professor. My mom, a professional. My mom and dad had a difficult marriage when I was a kid. My dad was a pretty abusive alcoholic. I also believe in speaking truth. Some of my family members get very upset with me when I speak that way about our dad. I love my dad. My dad passed away in 2014. He never dealt with his own trauma, and as a result, masked that with alcohol his whole life. And that traumatized me and my siblings and my mom. And, we've worked a whole lifetime to try to figure that out. I'm 50 now. I continue to unpack that. As a result, I lived with my mom in Fredericton, was born in Fredericton, lived in Charlotte Street, 376 Charlotte Street, in a green duplex. I can still remember it. I can still picture it in my head. And, by all definition, I think, mom was making $675 a month, and rent was $475. It didn't leave a lot of room. So I had those early experiences, I think taught me about, taught me to suffer in a way, to have challenge, to become a very empathetic, hardworking individual, to care about others. I've always cared deeply about others, to try and make a difference in our communities. Um, and the piece as well, so that you talk about, really trying to understand what does white privilege mean. Like I've had a lot of challenge in life. I never went to university. I climbed the corporate ladder. I've had lots of, that's my story and my journey. But I'm also trying to figure out, and I'm grateful, to those that have challenged my privilege, that have said, whoa, hold on now. Come on, man. You're pretty tainted in that view. I don't agree with you. I like those spirited conversations. So also, a year later, since we all joined, almost a year, to honor George Floyd, to call for action, at the Black Lives Matter rally that we had here in St. John, well over 1,000 people attended. And, we'll talk more about that in a minute, but it was just before that someone talked to me about my privilege. So I think I've always been caring. I've always been empathetic. I've always, wanted to see folks through a lens that was of equality, that wasn't differentiating between men, women, sexual orientation, color, other and other aspects. But I think it's been the last year in particular that I've said, enough is enough. Like, we can do better. And there's so much, there's so much, am I allowed to swear in this podcast, or? Okay. There's so much bullshit. There's so much talk. There's no, we just go around in circles. We just want to touch the surface. We don't want to dig in deep and really figure out why do we have some of the inequalities that we still have, 50, 60, 70 years later, hundreds of years later. So, and lastly, I'd say, as a human being, in that survival mode earlier in my life, I sold my values away for a paycheck. I climbed the corporate ladder. If I could just make enough money, I was going to be successful. And I, in fact, drove myself into a depression. I was miserable. I treated my wife poorly. And my life almost came completely unraveled. So when I took this job in 2016, when I was voted and graced with this job, I said, let's, first of all, we're going to live values, and we're not going to make promises we can't keep. And, being a courageous and bold leader is my DNA. So, long answer, right is right. We talked a bit about that before we started. And I've been really saddened, frankly, by some of the behaviors that I have seen from one human being to another. And I think leaders go first, and they chart a path, and they speak truth, and hopefully some others will come with them on the journey. And we need to be pointed in the right direction so we can fix some of these these systemic barriers and issues that folks face.
Thank you so much for opening up a little bit of your heart to us with the answer. And you most definitely can swear on this podcast. There's a lot of swearing in other episodes, and we appreciate it, because part of profanity is that blunt honesty. To be honest with you, when something is bullshit and you can't call it anything other than bullshit, then that is what it is. And I appreciate the fact that you are that blunt, that you will take that step, and that you will go that far, and you're no longer politically correct or politically bound to basically the rules of engagement that don't work. And I appreciate that. Natasha, I will bring it to you.
Hi, Natasha.
Hi. How are you? Well, nice to have you on the show.
Nice to see you.
Okay, so what did I miss? What was the question that you just
No, I just asked what brought him into this passionate world of advocacy for people
Okay.
who are, yes.
So I'll just follow up from there. So what are some of the hurdles? I mean, we've seen some of them play out in real life and on the media, that you faced as a mayor, when you were up against the resistance to fighting racism and making it a more equitable society for everyone.
Yeah, well, right out of the gate, I think it's important that we acknowledge where we are. And I
Mhm.
think we live in a society it's interesting in the previous, as we were just wrapping up, Sally was talking about, like, why are the political norms that you don't, um, that we don't go deep enough, that we don't talk about it, that if it's uncomfortable, we shouldn't talk about it. And that's a whole other podcast where we probably need to invite Brene Brown in to teach us about shame and all kinds of other issues. But I think just as a starting point, Natasha, like even getting people to talk about it, to
Mhm.
be open and transparent. Where are we? What are some of the challenges that we face as a community? What is the relationship like with our police? And other people of power, people that have power in, be it elected officials or other organizations and groups. So, I think when you're struggling to even speak truth, when you're struggling to put steps in place, when you're struggling to say the words systemic racism, when you're struggling to have courageous conversations and be uncomfortable, say, like, I don't know the answer to this. I'm an elected official. I'm the mayor of the city. It doesn't mean I have all the answers. In fact, I probably don't. But I have ideas and I have aspirations and I have a vision for where we can go. So I would say, first of all, that was a big challenge. We have a lot of governance challenges, the relationship between the city and its agencies and boards, which is very complex. And I think just the ability in this world to affect change quickly. And so first of all, if you can't talk about it, it's going to be kind of hard to affect positive change. Once you have spoken about it, what do you actually do? And here we are coming up on the year anniversary of the George Floyd rallies. And when I agreed to go to the Black Lives Matter event here, I said, I'm only going to go if we take action. If we're just going and we're going to gather together, I've been to a lot of those gatherings in the past, and I think it'll be incredibly disrespectful that that's all we do. But I'm not satisfied with where we are a year later. It's so that pace of change is very slow. And I can't imagine what that feels like as a Black Indigenous person of color in this province, where it's almost like people are patting people on the head and saying, now, don't overreact. Don't, so we just don't know yet how to navigate through this. We're not going fast enough. And there's more barriers than I could list in an hour-long show.
That's true. And I think we also face barriers like in speaking up. And I think we've discussed that on a lot of our shows on how you have to be the good minority in order to be even invited anywhere, which is why you would rarely see people who speak up too much, at these official tables. And, you sort of get passed over because it's assumed that you're going to say something that will make people uncomfortable. And yes, in order to make any kind of change, in order to just wake people up, you have to make people uncomfortable. They're not going to, just change things if they think everything's fine. So you must have faced some of that sort of, you're sort of turning on us and, you're supposed to be one of us and that. So that must have been probably difficult for you personally, but so how did you deal with that?
Yeah, so I am one of us. I'm a New Brunswicker. I'm a St. Johnner. I'm a proud Canadian. This land of ours, and again, I'm still need to continue to evolve my full understanding of obviously the relationship with Indigenous peoples, although it's already started with a place of deep respect. But I first of all, I'm not the darlings, and my girls, I have very similar. We don't what's the term? We don't suffer fools. Like, I don't have a lot of patience for a lack of tolerance and these kinds of issues. And if you want to get me revved up as an individual, tell me I can't do something. And then I usually double down. Like I have a really deep gas tank for, someone who says you can't do it. But I think that in itself is the very problem. And you mentioned it, Natasha, you have to behave a certain way. You can't be too outspoken. And, if you are, you're labeled as a troublemaker. And that is the problem. I think we've lost our ability to have these conversations. Social media has become a cesspool of hate and trolling and attacking. And I think as a society, we need an intervention, and an ability to come together and describe, what does success look like? And unfortunately, people lead with fear and anger and all kinds of misinformation. We elected a buffoon of a president prior in the US, and Donald Trump, who spread hate. You didn't have to wear your hood in the woods anymore. You just came out right onto Main Street because you were given full permission to attack people, to wear to carry around guns and do all kinds of crazy things. So we I think it's as leaders, especially, you have to make space for other people and other opinions, and for people to come forward and bring those concerns forward, or those opinions. And you have to be empathetic and open-hearted enough to say, I don't understand where you're coming from, but I want to understand where you're coming from. And then one important message for me as a mayor, we need to grow. We can't grow as a community unless we are open and welcoming and diverse and safe and all of those things. So I've always acted very swiftly because I believed it was the right thing to do. Whether it's, hate against our queer community, or hate against someone of color or newcomer. And I've always, when I've met newcomers, said, whether you can vote or not, or whether you've been in St. John for 100 years or 100 minutes, I am your mayor. It didn't matter. It doesn't matter. I wasn't motivated by the office. I was motivated by the opportunity to make a profound difference in our community. And as I got closer to realizing that I wasn't going to offer again, and throughout, if you made me choose between do what's right or do what I need to get reelected, I always would have chosen what's right. But too many of the leaders that we look to, they care about getting reelected. So their political will is constantly being filtered down, and I would say sold away for a bunch of reasons. And I want elected officials who aren't afraid to get fired every day.
That's really great to hear, and thank you. And St. John, I think, has been lucky to have you. I'm going to turn it back to Sally.
I wish every municipality had a leader who was not afraid to do the right thing and was not afraid to get fired or lose something for the right thing. I can honestly say you are the exception. And that is something I respect and commend highly. But know that you are the exception. I appreciate the fact that you are giving the message to the leaders and the future leaders to not be afraid to go against the grain. Because
Kelly, can I just add one thing?
Yes, please do.
Sorry to interrupt, but Natasha's question. One thing I didn't touch on, but there is a cost, and there is a cost. Like my not necessarily related, but for standing up and being courageous. My son has been physically attacked twice. I've gotten multiple death threats. My wife goes to bed crying at night. There's been times of great fear. I don't walk down dark alleys depending on what's going on. I look over my shoulder when I come out of buildings. There's a cost. And, again, and maybe foolishly for my, because you never want to put your own family, at risk or again, it breaks my heart to know that my son was beaten up, physically assaulted because of me, because of the job that I'm doing, because of the truth that I've spoken. the harassment, the trolling, my family name means something to me. To read online that Darling is a crook, Darling has no integrity. And again, rationally, no, it's not. Obviously, it's not true. But I'm just telling you that why we need to recruit more leaders, courageous and bold leaders, just like how geese fly through the air. The lead goose is there for a bit, and then the lead goose drops back and someone else comes up to the lead, and then that goose drops back. We need more people standing up, but we also need strategy and objectives and actions and metrics, because what my experience has been is that I think I've had tremendous support as a leader in this community, but I've told people I can't feel strength of silent support. You stay silent.
Amen.
I can't feel it. I'm by myself. I'm a goose flying on my own. So I just wanted to add that I'm not for a second, like, it hasn't been easy, but what is that's worth it?
So true. Very true.
Bravo. First, that was so well said. I can't feel the support of your silence. Like, that is the nail on the head. I'd also like to, unfortunately, welcome you as an honorary person of color, because that is our normal day-to-day life, is getting assaulted, whether we cooperate or not. No hate mail, and have our businesses burned and harassed and trolled. And so I'm very sad to welcome you as an honorary person of color.
Thanks for saying it that way. It gives me, that's a great perspective, right? Like,
that is exactly our life.
Yeah. That's exactly what was going through my head when you were listing all those things, looking over your shoulder, being afraid if you're too vocal, your kids are going to, all of that, check. You are, you have, like, as Sally said, been inducted into.
Welcome to the club. Well, thank you for that.
People of color.
But thank you for that. That's a massive mind shift for me. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you for that gift of, because the next time I talk like this, I will add, and like, that's every day for people in our community, because of no other reason than discriminatory behavior, systemic racism. Like, so thank you for that profound shift. You have just shaped my life in a profound way, because I mean, I know that, but you helped me. You really connected a wire in my head by saying that. So thank you.
Thank you. Alon, you must have lots to ask and say.
Have lots to ask and say. First, I want to say thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us. Definitely appreciate that. I hear your story, and I hear what you're saying, and you have to understand, I'm a very jaded and I'm a very jaded individual when it comes to certain things. I never experienced racism on the level of just a direct attacks. In no way, shape, or form did I experience that in New York City. I didn't experience that till I got here. And don't get me wrong, the States is fucked, right? Like, so for me to say that is a lot. I've never experienced, any of the harassment or just the blatant outright, whether it be name calling, whether it be just, rejection or looked over for jobs and opportunities or whatever. I've never experienced any of that until I moved here. So when I moved here to the Maritimes, my son's mother at the time was from here, and so they're like, oh, it's a great place to come and raise a kid, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, no, not so much. I mean, as an adult, taking on, racism is one thing, like you just said, but when it comes to your family, it's something totally different. And, I've had to go, my son will be 19 in August. I've had to go almost 19 years of seeing my son from daycare through finishing high school, experience outright blatant racism at every grade. And so those things here in the Maritimes, I feel, I've always said the Maritimes like a time capsule. Like everything here is like 10 or 15 years behind, the rest of the modern world. But I think I'd like to know, what is your perspective on maritime culture? Because we're hearing a lot, especially with this new, what is it, racism minister that they're trying to elect here in the province to do a racial survey. We're hearing a lot, and even in that job description, you're hearing there's actually a line that says that they want the person who is chosen for the job to take into consideration maritime culture and context. So I'd like to hear from you, like, is that worth preserving? Because for me, maritime culture and context is just an excuse to be blatantly ignorant and racist. And in my opinion, in 2021, with information everywhere, there's no reason to be voluntarily ignorant or racist. And quite frankly, ignorance and racism is not culture and shouldn't be considered culture. And I know St. John has probably a bigger visible minority population than I believe, Moncton or the greater Moncton area. But how do you see maritime culture? Because you've mentioned, you've got family, that are visible minorities. You have your daughter's LGBTQ. So, like, how do you feel towards maritime culture? And do you feel that is a viable thing, or just an excuse that now maritimers are using to cover up their inability or unwillingness to change?
Wow, that's a great question. First of all, again, wow, thanks for the gift of being here today with you. I'm learning a lot. Very powerful. The fact that you can, and I don't know what I sort of expect, big cities, and how are we shaped? How are our biases shaped? How are our opinions shaped? They're shaped from our family, from books we read, from movies we watch, from, so on. The fact that, in New York City, you didn't have, the challenges like you have, here in New Brunswick is disturbing. It's unacceptable. It's sad. No, you're not, no, you're not, I'm not saying that from a perspective, nor were you asking for anyone's pity, but the fact that, you've had, with your son now at 19, have had to deal with issues year after year after year is, completely unacceptable. I think that now, what are we going to do about it? I think the parts of the maritime culture that are positive, we should keep. And the parts that are other parts of that culture that isn't positive, we should flush it down the damn toilet and stop making excuses for ignorance and poor behavior. And we need to claim, as I said earlier, the systemic racism and other challenges that exist, the lack of action, the lack of openness and transparency that exists. I've been outspoken about our police and our relationship with protective service members here, but in this case, let's talk about police for a moment. And how do we, it's so interesting. We talk about it like, name an elected official that doesn't stand for openness and transparency. But then show me openness and transparency, secret meetings, no agendas, bad agendas, or, no strategic plans, no engagement or appropriate engagement with the public, a lack of data, and so on and so forth. So that has been, and how do we have these important conversations? I respect the role of police and fire, first responders in our communities. I have many members in my own family that are first responders. That doesn't excuse away the need for the type of change that we need in those power relationships that we have, in our society today. And to unpack, I've been being mentored by, I don't know if it'd be a very interesting conversation with you, with your group here and your podcast. Do you know Dr. Timothy Christie, who's the ethicist for Horizon? Yeah. So, Tim and others have been sort of mentoring me with some of my ideas and how we can move things forward. And, I think the problem we've got is we're not having the full conversations. I think we have to flush the shitty parts of our, excuse the pun, culture down the toilet. And we have to be unafraid to piss off our friends and family, because it's going to be friends. It's going to be family. Like, do we believe strongly enough in what's right that we are prepared to say to a closest friend, you're either going to change or you're not going to be in my life anymore? because that's how close it is. It's our colleagues, it's our friends, it's our family. And you made me think for a moment about my sister-in-law. She is tough as nails. Why? Because she's been dealing with bullshit her whole life. She's she's not that tall. She's pretty, she's pretty slender. She would take me in one round, not even one. I wouldn't even make it in one round, but she's had to fight from elementary school to middle school. And when her sister wasn't there to say, stop that, or her mom wasn't there to say, stop that, she's had to do it. And, some would call her edgy. Why is she too edgy? She's so outspoken. She's so abrasive. She's been trained to be outspoken, abrasive, because she hasn't had the same privilege that the majority have. So, and again, I was talking about this earlier. I was really, we have just an amazing artist here named Clyde Ray. I don't know if you guys know Clyde. He's a poet. He's a playwright, and he wrote a play called "We Were Here," and just amazing. And shame on me, shame on our school system that I didn't fully appreciate the role of these leaders in our community from our history that happen to be Black, who played massive roles in the city of St. John's history. And when the play was over, people were complimenting the cast and Neil Clements and Tim Christie and a number of others that were in that play. And Clyde wrote on Facebook, "Thank you very much, everyone, for your kind words. I hope the powers that be do something about it." And I was like really shaken by it. Yes, okay, yes, the powers to be, but we are the power. The people are the power. And the more the masses give the power to the minority, to the very few. There's only 11 members on council, so there's 70,000 people in St. John, giving the power to 11 people. That's exactly the same behavior that got us here. So I think as we come to grips with how we evolve, how we move forward, I am familiar with I had the job description on my desk for the racial discrimination commissioner, I think is the title. I may be getting it wrong, and have to go down through that again. But whether that's a perfect approach or not, what I tend to look at is how can it be shaped? Because a month ago or 2 months ago or 3 months ago, there was going to be no racial discrimination commissioner. So how can we put energy behind making sure that process that's about to be launched is actually meaningful? That's going to be true engagement with the community. That's going to have a real action plan that is going to be resourced appropriately for human and financial resources so that we can actually move ahead. And so I love this province. I think we are kind, generous people. I think it's beautiful here. I think we have a tremendous opportunity to grow and thrive. But if we don't address some of the whispers, I call them the whisper conversations, if we don't deal with those issues and make this a place where someone said to me last week, "Mayor, you will never eliminate discrimination." And I said, I didn't say it this way, but I'll say it with you guys. We can goddamn try. We can try, because, again, I've been privileged. I've had struggle with nothing like the struggle that others have had. And, I don't have all the answers, but I know that where we are isn't acceptable. We can do better. And it's a whole range of people, academia, a private and public sector working together, small groups, big groups, and defining what success looks like, and then taking the first steps.
Do you feel that New Brunswick will ever be as progressive? I mean, we're seeing PEI and even Newfoundland making, really major changes in how they're just even the optics look as far as, their promoting of their provinces. The PEI is making huge, changes and strides in being more diverse and showing, more and more open to diversity and things like that. But New Brunswick seems to be, at the tail end of this progressive movement. What do you feel is the reason for that? Is it just simply the power structure that is at the top of the food chain right now? Or do you feel that, you mentioned that, yes, it's the people have the power, which is true, but when the majority of the people are complacent and are happy where they are, what moves do you think need to happen? Because I mean, you have a province that is coming and welcoming not welcoming, but funneling in immigrants for the wrong reasons. They're not funneling in immigrants because they care about the immigrants and want to give them right. They're not doing it because they want a better life for them. They want it for the numbers. Yeah. Right. They want to say, yes, we have, a younger population. We've got the numbers, so you've got the Francophone community trying to get, strictly French speaking. You've got everyone clamoring for immigrants to come here for all the wrong reasons.
For the taxpayers.
Yeah. Right. And then complaining when they leave. Oh, why are they leaving? And then you have,
but also complaining when they arrive.
Right. And then you have that narrative that unfortunately I feel this province has never addressed and has never corrected its citizens of the whole thing of, well, the immigrants are coming and taking our jobs and taking our housing and they're making money off the government and blah, blah, blah. And I haven't seen any politician come out and correct the public and set the tone of, of equality and acceptance in this province with immigrants ever. And I've been here for almost 20 years.
Yeah.
I've never seen it. I've never heard it. We still as a province are not catering to, immigrants in their native language for, critical social services, for medical services. We're still demanding that, they need to learn one of two languages or none at all. There's a huge divide here. And so I'm curious, as someone who is in public office, what do you see what's the holdup? Like what's stopping New Brunswick from making that? Because honestly, let's be realistic. You and I both know that policy can be changed in a matter. It doesn't take years for policy to change, right? If you are there's certain things that within your grasp and within your scope that you can say, yes, I want to do differently now. And Blaine Higgs has that power as being the guy in charge of the province to say, you know what, we can make changes now. We can stop doing certain things now. What do you feel that it is just because the Conservatives are at the helm and calling the shots that's stopping New Brunswick from being progressive? Or do you feel that New Brunswick just is not a progressive province? Like, yeah. I've never seen New Brunswick take the helm on anything. I've seen New Brunswick be reactionary, but I've never seen New Brunswick take the helm and say, yes, we're going to step out on this ledge and do it. So how do you feel about that? Like, what are your thoughts on us moving forward?
Yeah, well, I think we do tend to lag. We're not as progressive as we need to be. I don't think you can put it at the feet of this premier. I think you have to put it at the feet of many premiers, over time. I think flip and flop back and forth, between governments many times doesn't allow. Can you imagine if you change the CEO of a private sector company every 4 years? You would not progress very well. You've got to remember a couple of things. I think it was, I was just trying to look for it. I don't know if it was Roosevelt or anyway, it was, you have to remember that everything in politics happens exactly the way it was designed to. So, if we want to progress, I agree with you, Elon, we can progress and we can progress rapidly. We have a $9 billion budget a year. If we want to put money in those spots, we can put money in those spots. And it is, but I would say it is a big ship. It turns slowly. Sometimes good enough is what the conversation is. I've asked in my corporate life, if you didn't ask certain questions about return on investment and market share and how we were going to do better with our customers, you get fired. In this world, if you ask those questions, you get shunned. Don't ask about outcomes. Oh God, that really makes people upset. Don't ask about how we're going to not just aspire to just human traffic, to use your word, Sally, and get people here. How are we going to authentically have people integrate into our communities, language, and deal with those issues? But, one of the challenges, and we've seen a lot of that here, I have challenged, and pushed back on the newcomers get everything free. Like, I've seen posts where newcomers were getting free cars, and I just like, bullshit. They're not getting
Right.
free cars. What are you talking about, free cars? But you remember in St. John, we've had, it's fear, It's fear. We've had the unfortunate moniker of having the highest rate of child poverty for decades and decades and decades in St. John. We've got all kinds of social issue. We've got billionaire families, and we've got people at the other end of the spectrum. We've got fractured newcomer support systems. We've got, poverty is a business in St. John. We've got more social and nonprofits than you could name. And what we need is more focus on outcomes. And what we need is, and again, it's no single answer. It's strategy, objectives. It's a true definition of what success looks like. It's metrics, it's accountability. And it's saying like authenticity matters. People now globally, they can go anywhere in the world. And I think, I believe that there's a great opportunity to attract a lot of people to, we're seeing it. I just got a message from someone moving here from Toronto. They saw a video I did back in whenever, and they're moving here. But what does success look like when they move here? How are they treated? How are they integrated? How are they welcome? Can they find a job? Can they find a home? And the problem, certainly I can speak to St. John, but probably the same all over the province, is that hate and that fear often is manifesting itself because they're not secure. They don't have food security. They don't have income security. So my point is that people will say to me, Mayor, when are we going to go back to normal? When is COVID going to go away? And I'd say, my answer is, I don't want to go back to normal. Normal sucked for a lot of people.
Right.
How do we actually develop and define and dream a new normal where people can thrive, economically, socially, and culturally? And, it's not simple. I wish it was, excuse me, but it is about having long-term view, having those long-term plans, and putting the right people in place, and having the strategy and the metrics and all those pieces. And the answers are here. Whether it's our podcast today, this conversation, or Mohammed Bag at the St. John Newcomer Center, or Ralph Thomas at Prude, or, these are some of the community champions here in St. John. They know the answers, but half of their time is spent going around in circles. The other half of their time is spent trying to raise money for next year. You're stuck in mud and you're in a 2-wheel drive car. So, I think we have to come together. And, I was involved in the Multicultural Council of New Brunswick did a tour. I'm not sure if the New Conversations tour. And in 2017, I think was the first one, 68% of New Brunswickers said, we got enough people. We don't need any more people. We don't need any newcomers here. And that number's dropped dramatically because they educated and they engaged with New Brunswickers, and they helped them deal with some of the, that fear-based conversation that was happening around, because what folks don't understand is that we're going to have 120,000 people retire over the next 20 years. And we need to replace those workers, or we won't have an economy that continues to move forward. But just having an economy isn't enough. And that's my fear, Elon, that I think the focus has been too singular on aspects, probably frankly, economy, because how do you get reelected? You create jobs. How do you ride the middle line, you create jobs, and you go around claiming a bunch of things you've done. Most of it is bullshit. That's how you get reelected again. So that apathy piece as well has been one of the biggest shocks of my time as mayor, how hard it is. And I have spent, you're looking at the chief communications officer for the mayor's office is me. The chief engagement officer for the mayor's office is me. Head of social media for the mayor's office is me. So I spend 15 to 20 hours a week on social media, live feeds, answering people's questions, engaging with people. And I am shocked at how difficult it is. If I post a picture tonight of my golden retriever with a ball cap on, that will get 700 interactions. If I post a picture about racial discrimination, I might get 5. So that's our challenge. We have to get more people willing to engage in the most difficult conversations that are plaguing our society from truly being a highly functional fair, balanced, society. And that's not the right way to say what I was just trying to say, but that's the problem. It's like cat in a tree. Ooh, let's go. Let's have that comment. That one, oh, that's really complicated, and it's really controversial. And if I say bullshit or fuck or any of those things, I'm a problem. I'm a problem. And that's, most my entire life, that's what I've been. I've been in the corner. I've been in detention. And as a mayor, people have wanted to put me in detention as well. But detention, like being the reason you went into detention, is probably actually very good for our future. So I wish I had a simple answer, but I know that if you're white and you've got a pretty damn good job and you've got a pension and you've gotten a raise every year for the last number of years, your life's pretty good probably in New Brunswick. But if you're everybody else, you're looking at the map saying, well, Christ, if I had any money, I might move somewhere else. But I can't move anywhere else because I don't have any money, and I'm afraid, and it takes courage to quit your job or to move somewhere else. So it's a real dilemma. We will not prosper and thrive until we have a community, the whole community, business, public sector, elected leaders, non-elected leaders, and just anyone else that commits to measuring what success looks like and defining what it looks like, measuring our progress, and dealing with these deep-rooted systemic issues.
Thank you so much, Mayor Darling. Do you have time for one more question or no?
Yeah, I'm good. Yep.
Yeah. Natasha, you have a question.
Oh, yes, thank you. Yeah, I didn't know if we'd have time. So this is, I just want to say, first of all, thank you for, all your responses. They were clearly authentic, and we can tell because we deal with a lot of people who aren't. So it's unique and different. So this question is related to your background, your personal experiences, and your professional. So you were on the police commission, and then you resigned. And I think you wrote about that. And you also mentioned you have family who are members and who are first responders. As an immigrant to New Brunswick, and I am both an ethnic and a cultural minority, a religious minority. So something I've noticed, and it's been noticed by others as well, but people are afraid to speak up, is how locals who are universally white, local translates into white here, do not hesitate, many of them, to use their connections with people in government, police, first responders, and use them to intimidate and to marginalize immigrants and minorities. And it's even easier if you're a racialized immigrant, because then you're very easy to spot. And same thing goes if you have visibly different cultural traditions. So given that this is a thing, how would you, so twofold question. First of all, do you think it's easier to influence change when you're not on a police commission as opposed to when you are? And and also, how would you suggest, given that you have family and friends in these professions, how would you suggest we bring about a fundamental shift in attitude that makes this kind of behavior socially unacceptable? Because it's always, that's how it was with domestic violence. That's how it's been with, how women dress, all of these things. It wasn't until it became socially unacceptable that people stopped doing it, obviously, out in the open. So something similar would have to be affected here. So do you have any thoughts on that?
I've got lots of thoughts. So the quick answer on, is it easier to affect change inside versus outside? The answer is absolutely not. I served on the police commission for almost 5 years. And what happens is you can't, likely you're not going to die from a paper cut, but you could die from 1,000 paper cuts. So you could die from a paper cut in the wrong place. And the analogy I'd use is that there's a bucket, and the bucket fills up with water, or that bucket fills up with shit. And at a certain point, I'll use my water analogy, it just flows over. I just couldn't take another meeting where we were still talking about the same things we had been talking about 4 years earlier? Should we have an open meeting or not? Should we engage with the community? Should we actually expect real engagement with the chief's working group on racial discrimination, or we're just going to let the chief have one meeting and then never have another meeting again, so it could get published in the newspaper, but he'd never report back on it again, and on and on and on. And what I talked about when I quit, I've been very open with this community. The police force needs to be more open, transparent, and proactive. The police force must recognize the reality of systemic racism in New Brunswick, and it must mitigate systemic racism, because systems are how racism lives on. We need to redefine core policing. We need to have a better relationship between the union and management, and the Police Act needs to be changed. It is a secretive boys' club. And it's very challenging, those relationships. It's a power relationship. I think I was saying to Sally before, and I've had amazing conversations with courageous citizens. Why does someone need a gun to pull me over if I walked across the street on a don't walk sign? And again, I think policing in Canada is different. Now, hear me out. It's different than in the US. There are some standards that are different, but I think we have to completely redefine the relationship. And there's so many challenges there. It's the engagement that the forces have with the community. They're not used to having to engage in that way. Here, we're not open and transparent enough. It's unsustainable. From a wage perspective, the average New Brunswicker in 2019, only 40% of New Brunswickers got a raise. If they got a raise, it was 1%. Our police officers and firefighters have gotten between 70 and 77% raises over the last 15 years, 2 to 3 times the rate of inflation. You're a police officer in St. John, you make $100,000 a year policing someone who makes $32,000 a year. So if we're going to have the conversation, we're going to put it all on the table, but so few people are willing to put it all on the table. So then what happens is when only a few speak out, all you have to do is actually discredit the few, even if they are speaking truth. So we need the organizations, we need the leaders, we need the management. And I'll repeat something that I said in a blog recently, and it got me in a lot of trouble. Yeah, everything again, that matters does. I said that on an issue related to our fire department, that our city manager and our fire chief had a leaderless response, and they were very unhappy with me, very unhappy. But it's true. When you let these groups weaponize and fearmonger the community, and you don't do anything about it, then it perpetuates. No different than sexual assault. No different than, so if we say sexual assault or racism or anything else that we've been talking about today is wrong, if you need help to speak up, and then you speak up and we don't do anything about it, guess what you're going to do next time? You're not going to speak up. You're going to remain marginalized. You're going to remain, you're just going to be impacted. And then what's going to happen is you're either going to live a life where you're broken, or you're going to break. You're going to go somewhere else. You're going to flip out at the person that says something to, on and on and on. So the systems are broken. We have to absolutely proclaim out loud that systemic racism is everywhere we look.
Yes.
And we have to have the courage to work together to say, I don't have all the answers, but I want to be part of a group of people who know we can do better. And we should not have anyone discriminated against for any reason. And it happens every day. So, you can go through life 2 ways. You can go through life with blinders on and believing that everything's just rosy. Yeah. And as long as I've got enough to eat, and as long as my car runs, as long as my house is big enough, then that can be a version that's good. Or you can go through life knowing that unless we're all doing okay, we can't truly be a thriving, growing community. The latter is what I believe. And, I don't even know what I'm doing next, to be honest. I knew that I could not continue in this role, that for a variety of reasons. I used the analogy earlier today. It'd be like loving your spouse so dearly, but not being able to stay with them because you just can't anymore. You can't be with them. So I'm not going to be the mayor after June the 7th. Technically, the vote is on May the 10th, but I'm starting my second term on June the 7th as an engaged, ferocious, truth-speaking, uncuffed, unmuzzled citizen of this city that's going to fight for what's right. And I'm excited. I'm excited. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how I'm going to earn a nickel. I don't know what's next. I should be probably scared, but I'm excited because I'm moving into a next chapter of my life. So none of the five of us here can do this on our own, but we can continue to speak up and encourage others to join a movement and make it so difficult for people to ignore us that like ignoring us actually can't be an option. And it is politicians in particular make policy decisions sometimes for good reasons, often based on pressure. So I think the objective here is to have that everything we dream of for everyone, regardless of who they are, and continue to work together until we've achieved it.
Thank you
Thank
very much.
you. Yeah, thank you very much. And I'm just going to finish up by saying, I've always said here, government sets the tone. And if there are leaders like yourself, that's probably how you get, make things socially unacceptable. So I wish we had somebody like that here, because I have never seen any leader in my city, I'm from Fredericton, come out and speak like that. So I think that's very, very important. Thank you.
Well, I think it's just one last thing. Last night I had a motion at council. I'm proud that it was my last motion of my political career. And it was to have the city join the UNESCO Coalition for Racial Discrimination. And what happens is, well, it's complicated. What do we do? What can we? Well, the UNESCO Coalition, which has 83 municipalities already signed on, it's been endorsed by the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. I'll send it to you all. And it has 80 actions that we can take. So let's start there. Let's stop making excuses. And let's start there. Let's start with diversity. Let's start with a SWAT team to address race-based discrimination and hate crimes. Let's have the provincial and federal governments continue to call on them, which we did last year, to make racial discrimination illegal. There's so many actions that we can take. And the problem is that so often we accept excuses.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
All right.
Natasha, did you have anything else to add?
No, I think I had my turn, so I'm going to turn it back to you. Thank you.
Alon, did you have anything to add?
Oh, there's tons more to add, but that we'll save all that for another day and another time.
Another day,
But thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate your candor and your time.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much, Mayor Darling, for your time. It was very valuable to us to have you speak with us, especially as all three of us have mentioned in one way or another. You are pretty much the only leader who has taken a very clear, distinct, direct stand towards change. And it's something that I honestly believe is that we cannot reach equality without ensuring that there is equity, which means there will be a distribution, which means that everybody has something to lose. But if we're all gaining together, then what power does that loss have? And I really appreciate that you recognize the risk, not just to yourself, but to your children. And I've been asked in my lifetime, what if your actions impact your children? And I told them, well, the biggest impact that could happen to my children is if their mother gets killed. And that is likely a risk I am taking. And they say, well, then what are you going to do? I say, well, my children will know that their mother died being a badass. And that's more than enough for me, because it's going to teach them to continue to be the strong, courageous, good individuals that we need for humanity to progress, because we are at a standstill. And until we solve this really mundane, stupid problem that we have created out of nothing, really, we cannot progress together forward in any form as humanity. Your time has been so valuable. Thank you so much for taking the time to answer our questions, for exposing a little bit about yourselves to us and to our listeners. And listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. Be kind to each other, support one another, and stand up for each other. Have a wonderful day, everyone.
Okay. Take care, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye.